Interview time.
The first question is from DJ Psych. What are your current favorite hardcore breaks tracks from any labels?
At the moment it would be Hard Boiled 2, the A side. I only got it on white label, I don't remember the track, but Ice Cube's releases are wicked. I'm quite into some of the new hardcore project stuff, the darker stuff. I think they're my favourites at the moment. I like all the Firewall productions, they're all really good. Yeah, those are the ones I'd go with for the minute.
Do you listen to much of the new school break stuff, like Control Z, Screwface, Breakfasters, etc.?
I've probably heard them, but I tend to make the clips for the shop, and so if we don't get it in the shop, I don't hear the tracks. So yes and no would be the answer to that. I have to admit I'm not that focused on just one type of music. I tend to listen to whatever gets thrown in my direction, so I hear all sorts of things and then I quickly forget what they're called.
Do you think with the current polished production sound in breaks, it loses some of the grittiness and character prominent in many classic old school tracks?
I don't know, I think a lot of the classic old school tracks were very clean. If you look at Asen, Prodigy, anything from Suburban Bass, anything from Production House pretty much, anything from Moving Shadow, and a lot of those were really big tunes and most of them were pretty clean. There's definitely something to be said for the gnarly, rough sound, but I think it's a misconception that all old school is badly produced. A lot of it was very well produced, albeit with studios and stuff that couldn't match what you can do now. But it's not like it's dirty, I think it's just different.
Okay. What would you say are the top 5 most important things for a good mixdown / master?
Oh, you're asking me? I've made so many dodgy mixdowns. Let me have a sip of tea while I think about it. 5 things. There's only really one thing. You have to get everything right. I mean, if you make the treble too loud or the bass too loud, that's fucked it. It's tough. I can tell you how I do a mixdown, but it doesn't always work out how I'd like. I normally start with the drums and the bass, and then if it's got a piano, I EQ the piano in, just because the piano's a bitch to EQ. And if that's sounding about right, I add the vocals, and then strings, sound effects, anything else that's going on. Then I move on to the stab pattern. But I guess if you want to get a really good mixdown, you need to start off with very, very clean samples. The cleaner, it's a bit like, I always think of it as a bit like making a cake or something. If the ingredients you put in are right in the first place, you're going to end up with a good result. If you put in just any old stuff, you're going to get sometimes good, sometimes crap, you just don't know.
With software becoming more and more popular with many producers selling up their hardware, what equipment would you say is a necessity over software?
A good strings machine. Most software strings and that sound like, I don't know, just kind of thin and crappy. And the ones that do sound big are like a trick big. Once you've finished your mix, they still sound thin, and you think, how did that happen? It sounded great when I played it, but I don't know, they just lose something. I would also say that things like the Nord and the Virus and, you know, boxes for analog, digital, whatever they are, boxes, they tend to give a different texture to software synths. Also, the old school keyboards can't be beaten, the 101 and the 303. Although saying that, the 303 software is pretty much the same and less annoying than the actual 303. But yeah, I would say you want something outboard for strings, specifically. Personally, I use a mixture of both, but then I'm lucky I have that luxury.
Okay, and the last one from DJ Psych.
These are all psych?
Yeah,
Jesus.
I told you
It's
there
the
was
psych
a lot.
interview.
What processing would you apply to the Winston's Amen loop to give it that unique KF feel? Or would you use an already modified Amen sampled from another source?
The simple answer to that is yes, because I would do any of those things. To make it sound like Night Force, I would probably not EQ it at all and have it slightly out of time on an S1000 sampler. I've got maybe 8 or 9 different amens I flick between. I don't do a lot of processing on breaks. You can do, and with brilliant results. Just depends on what you want to get. I've never really spent that much time on it. Does it sound good? Yes. Finished. That's pretty much how it goes in my head.
Hatrix wants to
Uh-oh.
know,
Watch my technical expertise.
what for you now is the holy grail of music production? What would be the ultimate elusive feat you'd love to achieve?
It's probably never changed. I'd like my track to sound like everybody else's. You know when you listen to somebody else's record and you're like, that's brilliant, I wish mine was like that? That hasn't changed. It's been like that since the first record I made. Occasionally I listen back to things that I've done and I think, you know, I did a really good job there. What For Not Sure, for example. I think the production on that is really good. The new album, I think the production is much higher. But it doesn't really matter because my perspective on my own music will always be completely out of whack. I'll never really be able to tell if it's good or crap. So I guess I just want to keep improving. I think my production's improved a lot in the last year or so. Hopefully it'll keep going like that. But there's no eventual aim. I have no goal to reach. In a way, I feel I've achieved most things in the music industry. And production-wise, just to be better is about as big as my achievements get.
How did you and your skate buddies all end up making tunes? I mean, didn't you find that some people in the group just weren't the type to get creative with music?
I think anyone will be creative with music if they're given the tools and the time and they think of it as a fun thing. I don't think you have to be musically... In fact, I'm certain you don't have to be musically talented to do well in the music industry. I mean, look at me. Most skaters have got not necessarily a good musical mind, but a mind that's open to ideas, and so they'll have fun with that sort of thing. You know, some of them work better in the studio than others. Some of them are more anxious to get in the studio than others. I mean, Alki D is a good example. He loves being in the studio, but it's such a hassle getting him in because he's got a lot of other commitments, and he's kind of chilled. He's very slack. If I don't keep phoning him up and saying, come to the studio, he won't come. And when he's in, he couldn't be more happier. He's got all samples and just, it's brilliant.
The architect asks, you and many people have talked about the current state of hardcore being pretty boring. Have you ever discussed this with some of these prominent DJs, i.e. asking them what the hell they're doing with their lives?
Well, it's difficult because for a start it would be extremely rude for me to go up to one of the big name DJs and go, wow, your music's boring. Secondly, they may not think it's boring. I mean, I think a lot of death metal is boring. I like some of it. I think a lot of it's very boring, but a lot of people disagree. Boring? It's boring. Boring, boring, boring. Interviews which just go on and on about the same question are boring. Everyone's opinion is valid. If you don't agree with it, that's fine.
For someone thinking about getting into producing, what would be some startup suggestions? Hardware, software, tips of the trade, warnings, etc.
First thing to do is see if you actually like making tunes. The myth of making tunes and the actual making tunes is two different things. One is somebody goes to the studio and has loads of fun and comes out with a brilliant tune. The other is a person repeatedly goes into the studio and has to spend a lot of time and effort editing and fiddling around, and they finish up with a track which isn't very good, and they know they've got to go back and do it all again. And then they find the disc has crashed, and it means they've got to work from scratch, and it's very, very annoying. So yeah, firstly, go to somebody else's studio. That's what I would say before you do anything. Same with turntables or skateboarding. Have a go on somebody else's skateboard. Try somebody else's turntables before you do anything. If you've done that and you decide you want to make tunes, get a PC and download all the software for free. That's what everyone does anyway. I'm just honest enough to say it. If you like that, throw the PC in the bin, get a Mac and buy the software, because you can't get it for free. Boo. Hardware is of course great to have in my opinion, but again, you need to work in stages. Get a simple program that you can start making a tune on, find out if you like it, find out if it's what you want to do, and just build from there. Helpful things to do in the industry is copy somebody else's track, because it teaches you format and style and how to do things. Copy sounds, learn how to manipulate sounds. Speak to Hatrix, he knows everything. And don't ask me questions because I don't know anything.